Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dustina. This is Spiritual Boujee Astrology, and we're going to take a look at the astrological transits of September 1st to September 7th. Now, some of you guys are going to notice that this is going to go out well before the new week, and that's because September 1st is Monday. And I don't want to put out two episodes on top of each other and have people get confused because sometimes that happens. I want to actually put the September month ahead video out on September 1st because I have an announcement that is going to happen on the September month ahead video. I'm not going to announce it beforehand. So there's a method to my madness. Deal with the madness. Anyways, that last week of Saturn in Aries had tension, it had frustration, it had outbursts, it had results, it had consequences, it had things coming up to the surface. And I said, we're going to start to see a bleed over because there's so much that's going on that's starting to pull the past vibration into the present. And it's just like, but I'm just trying to make a better life for us. I'm just trying to run a business. I'm just trying to get our home life together. I'm just trying to do something over here. Because we've been so target locked focused, we've missed some things. We missed that it was bothering somebody. We missed that things did not go to plan in another area. We completely just decided not to pay attention to it at all in some ways. And the things that have been ignored, missed, neglected, found ways of coming back into the forefront and bleeding into the new. Now, for some people, there was resentment, there was emotional frustrations. And I said, especially when the moon was going through Scorpio last week, that little things that have been sitting on our stomachs for a while are going to find ways of coming out. Now, for some of us, we're going to be looking at so much of the new. It's just some part of us is like, oh, I guess I just can't, I can't support that. I can't be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of that. And that was part of the result. That was a part of the outcome. That was a part of the consequence. For other people, that vibration of last week was the deep-seated, long-standing emotions of something not going to plan, something not going right, of feeling ignored, of feeling missed, of feeling like things are surpassing us in some way. We're getting neglected in some way. And that moon in Scorpio brought a lot of intention and intensity and frustration and just a bubbling up of emotions to the surface because something did not feel fair. Now, at the start of that moon in Scorpio, we also had the Venus Pluto opposition. And I said that there would be things about that Venus Pluto that triggered frustrations, triggered fears, it triggered insecurities. And once the moon went into Scorpio, like all of the deep seated insecurities were coming to the surface very, very quickly. Considering we had other things starting to activate the old areas of the sky at the same time. And when I'm referring to that, I am referring to Jupiter not only being in its own shadow now, but now retracing the steps of Mars. Again, the last full week of Saturn being in Aries, because the way we start this week is Saturn in Pisces. The way we end this week is going to be an eclipse in Pisces. There's going to be a lot of emotions. But last week was the first triggers and awareness and the bleed over of those emotions. As we go into this week, we're going to be dealing with them a lot more front and centered. The triggers for what we needed to focus on were last week. The awareness that we needed to back up. We needed to go back. We needed to go deal with something that we weren't dealing with. It got neglected. It got ignored. Put on the back burner, put to the wayside. We thought we were done. We thought we were good. And something came up. Little by little, things came to the surface. Little by little, things came around. And now we're going into this week. September 1st, Saturn is going to retrograde back into Pisces. And that is where he will remain until February 14th. Happy Valentine's, everybody. Yay. Now, the retrograde time frame of Saturn in Pisces that starts this week will continue all the way until roughly around November 28th, 29th. There's two retrogrades that end simultaneous. One's a Mercury, and one is Saturn's, and I don't remember which one's which, but 28th, 29th time frame. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody here in the States. Excuse me. Now, in addition to that, we have other things that are starting to come to the surface. We have emotional things that we need to go back to. And there's a lot of things about this week that is going to take us back to events that can go all the way back to last fall. Now, the quick question would be, why last fall? Why are we going so far back? Is it just because of Mars? Nope. Is it just because of Jupiter? Nope. We have to really focus on Pisces and what Pisces rules in our chart. On September 17th of 2024, we had our first Pisces eclipse. It was an out of sign eclipse. And in that energy, it triggered an awareness of something we needed to heal, something that we needed to focus on, somewhere where we are going to have gains, but we are not ready for the gains. And that eclipse in September of 2024 triggered a year-long vibration of like, we need to heal this area. We need to focus on it. We need to do things. We need to make space. We need to overcome. We need to clear some things out emotionally, physically. We need to clear things out. Now, in the spring, we did not have a Pisces eclipse. At the end of this week, on September 7th, we will have our second in the series of 3 Pisces eclipse. But remember, on the Pisces side, we have a very interesting situation where every eclipse is a full moon eclipse. Now, with Saturn retrograding back into Pisces, days before, it's literally the same week, so days before our actual Pisces eclipse, Saturn is also telling us it's time to go back to something. It is time to focus on something. It is time to experience what this vibration is going to activate for us, and it will activate a year of gains. Why do I say gains? Because this will be a full moon eclipse conjunct the North Node, the head of the dragon. I will consume, I desire. Gimme, gimme, gimme. I'm a greedy baby. This is what I want. This is what I deserve. North Node. A full moon eclipse conjunct the North Node. We are meant to have gains, healing gains. We are meant to have perspective, gain perspective. Now, some of us, if we have committed to the healing of the last year, we did the work. Saturn ruling time, karma, and responsibility will tell us that it's time to focus in an area, to have certain things, to activate certain things that we were not prepared to activate prior. We needed the time. We didn't need it 6 months. We needed a year. And so much of this week is bringing forth the perspective as to why we need to step back, why we need to renew our focus in a certain area. And in a lot of ways, we are meant to have gains. Saturn going back into Pisces, in addition to a Pisces eclipse, is showing us where our focus is going to be for a majority of the next 6 months. But it won't always be directly there. It'll be layers to there, inklings to there. What does Pisces rule for you? Is it a money house? Is it a connection house, the 3rd, the 5th, the 11th, the 7th? Does it make you connect to people differently? Are you looking to invest in something? Are you getting opportunity in something? There's a reason our energy is being shifted back somewhere. And it is a part of the bleeding of the old and the new coming together, finding ways to intertwine. Now, some gains will be hard to recognize at first. They will come with difficulties because good old daddy Saturn, he doesn't always like to make things easy. He wants you to earn it. And some of us are going to be put into situations to where we're going to earn a connection, earn our desires, earn elements in our healing process. What does Pisces rule for you? Now, whenever it comes to the vibration of Saturn, it's going to be very easily felt after the weekend, going into the first part of next week. There will be a drive shift, an awareness shift, things going on with our elders kind of shift. Because I was real hard on that last week too. That as we start to see Saturn going backward, it's going to have ways of manifesting in our elders. And some of us are going to see them have to shift backwards, take a step backwards. You are going to have to take a step backwards because they are having to take a step backwards type of shift. And as much as we want to continue forward into something, little things will start to pop up that slows down the new. And for some people, given one other element of this week, we are starting to pump our brakes to where we can't continue much further than this. In the excitement, in the new, and the element of the timeline bleeding together is one extra layer to why we're going to pump the brakes. Now, the question is, who's making us pump the brakes, Dusty? What's going on with that? Uranus. July 7th, I almost said July 4th. It wasn't July 4th. It was July 7th. Uranus started its pinky toe dip into Gemini. And I said, we're only going to get it for 4 months. By the time we get to the beginning of November, he will retrograde back into Taurus. We are now at the midway point. This week, Uranus is going to turn retrograde. And where we've had some kind of excitement, where we've had some type of new coming through, where we've had a development, where we've had a spark, an interest, an idea. I don't want you to take the idea and look at it as like what you wanted to do, you're not going to be able to do forever. It's more along the lines of you have grown as far as you're going to grow this year, whether it's in your business, whether it's in a product line, whether it's in your relationships. Something has gone as far as it's going to go. And then there is this brake pumping vibration. One element of it is Saturn, going back into the old sign. The other is Uranus turning retrograde, letting us know that some bright idea, Uranus in Gemini, has gone as far as it can go right now. And then in a lot of ways, the next layer, the next level, the next desire that we have in this area is going to have to take a seat, take a number, wait your turn. And that turn is most likely going to come in the springtime next year. Not so much this year, not so much where we have been. Can you still have excitement? Can you still have some inklings of growth? Yes. Enough of the other planets are in forward motion that tells me that we can still have like growth in one linear vibration, but we're not going to go from having the food truck to a brick and mortar this year. Something's going to stop you and tells you, stick with the food truck. Maybe change your environment a little bit, get different contracts, save the money, get a good marketing plan together, and revisit the brick and mortar, just using this as like a visual example, in the springtime. Level up next year, because more of 2026 is about us becoming familiar with our new normal than 2025. 2025 is a glimpse, an idea. The bigger picture stuff will come next year. And the way we start September is recognizing we're coming to a peak. We're blending the old into the new. And the more the old starts to come up, that's not taking away from the new. There's going to be some new that remains, but there will be some things that we're going to start to realize I don't have the time for it right now. Something's going on with grandpa, something's going on with grandma, something's going on over here. I've got this old responsibility, I've got this old thing. And there's going to be a lot of things that trigger our emotions over and over again throughout the rest of the year. But in a lot of ways, this week, because this is, again, the start of Saturn going back into Pisces, as well as the second Pisces eclipse, telling us it's time to focus on something. Now, there's one other big transit to this week, and it is the one that gives direction. It is the one that gives lessons. It is the one that gives challenges. And we will be building to it all week. It's actually going to perfect right before the eclipse. So somewhere, I'm doing this right from I think it's around the 5th. Oh, it's the 4th. It's the overnight hours of the 4th going into the 5th. We're going to have a square, so 90-degree angles, a square between Jupiter and Mars. And those two are really interesting. And I think I'm going to save a lot more of that to talk about in the closing, just because I've already put so much emphasis into what we need to deal with the top lines, and that is Saturn going into Pisces and the eclipse in Pisces. So a lot of Pisces, Jupiter stuff. So I'm going to save the rest of Jupiter, Mars for the closing. Let's get into the week. Let's get into the transits. Let's get into Monday, because we got to start it out. First things first, good old Saturn. At 3:06 a.m. Central Standard Time, Saturn is going to retrograde back into Pisces. Right now, I've got the screen at 2:30 a.m. You can see right here at the top of the screen. Here's good old daddy Saturn, 0 degrees, 0 minutes. I bumped this by 1 hour. There he is, 29:59. In the overnight hours of Sunday going into Monday, there is the re-entry of Saturn going into Pisces. And I feel like there is a tone all throughout the day that really starts to make us aware of a different responsibility, a different pattern, a different plan, a different thing that can be creative for some people. But I also feel like for other people, if we haven't really been taking responsibility for certain things, because that's what Saturn makes us do, there's going to be something about like the fun of the summer is almost over, and now it's time to reconcile. Now it's time to deal with something that for some people, we're almost running from over the course of the summer. And we're going to have something that speaks to emotional triggers that will start to develop over the course of Monday. But the weight of something internally, we're going to feel the weight of Saturn going back into Pisces. The full trigger around it, I actually don't think it's going to happen until later in the evening time, not so much this overnight hours, but I think internally a lot of people will feel it before we have the actual trigger. So we're going to keep it going. As we get into the afternoon, we're going to have our first lunar transit between 1 and 3:30 p.m. So I got this now at 2:30. The moon in Sagittarius, 26 degrees, 48 minutes, is going into a trine with Chiron, 26 degrees, 41 minutes. Anytime we have anything having to do with Chiron, it's very neutral energy. It can be about the solution of something, how the solution has worked out, what we've done in the past to create a solution towards something, fixes that have happened, again, awareness around wounds, but more so like focused on like, oh, you can do this little thing, like, oh, you can make your own cough syrup, oh, you can do this, have you ever tried this? Like we get benefits in like indirect ways that we weren't necessarily anticipating. So it's like whenever you're having a conversation with somebody, they're giving you like the tips and the tricks of something, of how to fix something, even if you're not immediately taking the action to fix something. The idea is solution oriented whenever it comes to this earlier part. Now, the one thing I didn't say before, but I'm going to bring it up now, is when it comes to the first, this is our last full day of Mercury being in Leo. And Mercury's been here since late June. He's been here for a while. He's sick of Leo. So sorry. He's sick of Leo. And there is an awareness of like pride or for some people, even exhaustion that is kind of coming through. And we can be getting some kind of news, some kind of communication, some kind of direction that we don't necessarily realize like we're hearing something for the last time because it doesn't necessarily feel like that. But it might be the communication that something is about to come to an end, something is about to come to a close. And this initial part feels like an understanding. For other people, it feels like trying to understand two different people that aren't seeing eye to eye just yet. But it's going to make sense as we go further into the first, and more so once we get into the second, third, and the fourth. Now, Mercury is going to trine the moon. This is going to be the most exact between 5:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So you can kind of see this here. If I go ahead and bump this to 7:30, we also get into another part of this transit. So right here, the moon is starting to get to its separation point to Mercury. It's not quite 30 minutes past its trine. But once we get to the 7:30 marker, we also start to feel the moon's square to Saturn. And this is really interesting because Saturn just retrograded back into Pisces. We just went back into something. And I feel like there's going to be some like indirect communication, indirect desire, indirect direction. And the indirect, I'm talking about because of Mercury's trine to the moon. But then once we go ask about something, talk about something, bring something up to somebody, it is immediately met with emotional difficulty. It is met with frustration. It is met with judgment. It is met with some kind of frustration that really can set the tone for a lot of people. Or we get advice. Hear me out. Mercury trine the moon first. That's the advice. Mercury is advice here. And once we take it or we make a decision, the internal reflection or external reflection in regards to asking something, talking to somebody about it, it is a mood shift. And it could either be a mood shift in regards to now we have to focus on an elder, moon square Saturn. Now we're going to have to focus on our responsibility, moon square Saturn. Now we have to focus on being productive with something, moon square Saturn. And the reason I'm so heavy about that is because once we get past the moon square to Saturn at 8:44 p.m. Central Standard Time, so bump this to 9:30, the moon is still in a square to Saturn, but now the moon is in Capricorn. As the moon leaves its square from Saturn, was it leaves Sagittarius and goes into Capricorn, there's something about this trigger of the moon squaring to Saturn of like a challenge, a frustration. There's something that sets a mood right here that brings forth an awareness of either where we have to be productive, moon now in Capricorn, where we are having to deal with some type of emotional constipation, not just a challenge. Like some people, like they don't even want to talk about their emotions. And now Saturn going back into Pisces, it's either like you just see how blocked someone is, or all of a sudden we see how unblocked it is. Like it's just, but it's emotional. I'm mad. I don't like it. I'm getting older. This isn't working. You've been ignoring me. You've been focused on something else. And usually, the moon going into Capricorn, I would not initially say we got a lot of emotions that are going to come out. But this one right here feels like we got a lot of emotions that needs to come out. And I think it's just the beginning of once the moon goes into Capricorn. Just because we have that square with Saturn newly in Pisces setting the stage. But after we get through that initial square, we have this trifecta energy of the moon in Capricorn, where the moon is in Jupiter sign. Jupiter is in the moon sign. No, I'm sorry. Moon is in Saturn sign. I'm doing this so backwards. The moon is in Saturn sign. Saturn's in Jupiter sign, and Jupiter's in the moon sign. And we have this whole trifecta energy going between the three, where the two cardinal signs, Capricorn and Cancer, are also feeding off of impacting what Saturn and Pisces is doing. And again, Saturn and Pisces is initiating some old energy, some old things coming back up to the surface, old wounds, things that we need to heal, old memories that are coming back around. Something triggers those old memories coming back around. But it is also setting a glimpse over these few days of the moon going through Capricorn, a glimpse of what it's time to focus on once we get into the actual eclipse that's going to go exact on September 7th. So we become aware of, again, something we need to be productive about, something that we need to go through, something with our elders as soon as that moon goes into Capricorn. And some people will become very stoic. Other people will become very focused on the old thing that's coming to the surface, i.e., Saturn is back in Pisces. Okay, moving along. Let's get back into the charts. There's so much interest in this dynamic. Now, the moon is still in its square to Saturn after it goes into Capricorn. Afterwards, between 10 p.m. and midnight, the moon is going to hit its square to Neptune. There can be confusion. There can again be stuff about the old, because Neptune can have to do with nostalgia. There can be what we do to try to like hide from the responsibility. Like, you know what? I just need a drink. I don't need to talk anymore. I just need a break. I just need a drink. I need to go do something. Give me a break. And it can create the illusion of a wedge, but it can also be that thing that once you sit down and you do start talking about something, if somebody's willing to actually unload and talk, that afterwards we can start to lighten the mood with some of the nostalgic aspect of the talk. It's like, you know, I know your dad hasn't always been great, but we had that one time. Do you remember that time that, he got himself locked out of the house or he fell, or we start talking about those old nostalgic kinds of stories. And it can be about the elder, or it can be just a complete distraction into something else. But the moon hitting the square to Neptune feels like either inspiration, the need to drown our senses, i.e., take a drink, take a puff, something like that, or nostalgia, going back down the old road. There can also be things about like the wellness of our elder that starts to take shape. It really kind of comes down to the human effect of what you're dealing with here. The moon is now in Capricorn, and whatever highlight is coming in for a lot of people Monday evening is setting the stage for what we're focusing on throughout the rest of the week, but really heightened of what we're dealing with the moon in Capricorn. Okay. By the time we get past midnight, we're done with the moon square. We're going to get more a little bit focused into Tuesday. Tuesday doesn't have a whole lot going on. Again, I will say Monday again was that last full day of Mercury being in Leo. By the time we get into the morning time at 8:23 a.m., so I got this now at 8:30, Mercury is now in Virgo. Mercury is now in its home sign. And for some people, Mercury is either news of something, a contract of some sort, communication of sort. There is an arrival, but it doesn't feel like the arrival of a person per se. Are some people going to have a new person showing up at the job or something like that? Absolutely. But not everybody's going to have a new person. Some people are going to have new information, new layers, new levels, new things that can even speak back to whatever happened during the Virgo eclipse, or not the black moon, not the eclipse. Sorry, I am so screwed up with my words today, guys. Whatever happened in the first new moon in Virgo can start to impact or pick back up the next round, the next layer, or the next form of communication that activated in the black moon in Virgo. Now, is that all going to happen at 8:23 a.m.? No, I feel like that's actually going to be stuff that we deal with through Tuesday and Wednesday. And that's why I'm saying for some people, the moon in Capricorn has a lot of productivity to it, something we need to be productive about. And Mercury going into Virgo adds one extra layer of being productive, because Mercury is not only in its own home sign, it's in Virgo, it's in its exaltation, it's in Virgo. But it's also in whole new areas of the sky, but areas of the sky where we've already had activity. So it's feeding off of something prior. Okay, moving along. Mercury is going to enter Virgo, like I said, at 8:23 a.m. We're not going to have a whole lot astrologically going on until we get into the afternoon between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. Now I got it at 5:30. We're going to go through the sun 10 degrees, hitting a trine to the moon 10 degrees. So we have the sun 10 degrees, 42 minutes in Virgo, hitting this trine to the moon at 10 degrees, 45 minutes in Capricorn, earth to earth, productivity to productivity, communication, documentation, desire in some way, ego in some way, reflection in some way, giving direction, giving an idea, giving a concept to the moon. But this does feel productive. It feels like we're building off of something. We have a buildup all throughout this week because we're building up towards an eclipse. And this can have a lot of desire of the things that we need to do and what we need to handle. There can also be, again, a reflection of something that we need to deal with in regards to the elder, because, again, the moon is now in Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn. Saturn represents the elder. Some of us, it can be a reflection of, okay, here's your responsibility. This is what we need you to do. This is what we need you to take on. This is the direction we have hopes for. And that can also be a part of this conversation. We're still in the buildup between Jupiter and Mars. I know I said I would cover more of this in the closing. I'm just kind of like reiterating that. We are building up towards like a direction, an action, and a desire as much as we're building up towards the eclipse. So please understand there is a buildup in this vibration. And a lot of the things that we are working on and that we are doing are part of the buildup. Okay. Beyond that, though, there's not a whole lot to Tuesday. Mercury entered Virgo. We've got new things going on. The moon's going to be in Capricorn. We're in a lot of like head down, mouth shut mentality. When we get into the third, right after midnight, between 2:32 and 2:44 a.m. Central Standard Time. So I got this now at 2:30. This is whenever Uranus, 1 degrees, 27 minutes, will hit the square to Mercury. Now, this is our last major transit with Uranus before Uranus turns retrograde. Uranus is going to turn retrograde 2 days later on the 5th. But we get for some people, we're going to either go one of two ways between the news and the direction that's coming in between Tuesday and Wednesday. It is either like giving the go ahead, but one side can feel hesitant with the Uranus vibration, or it is giving an outcome of telling someone you need to move forward without our support because Uranus going retrograde. There's a hesitation there. For some people, there will be a hesitation in the vibration that somebody needs to continue to do something without this support, without this part. For other people, it's going to be the decision of some sort that we are about to change something, that we don't want to continue with something in some way. For other people, it will be a green light, but it'll be like your last green light for a while. So again, we still have steps into the new. We're just starting to get into the inclinations of what that old bleed over start is starting to look like. So we can still have elements of the new in our new direction kind of coming forward. And again, we have this building square between Jupiter and Mars that, again, I haven't quite talked about yet, that it's giving direction, it's giving a challenge, it's feeding into a desire. So we still have new in the buildup, even with the old stuff. So we're trying to figure out like the productivity in regards to like how we can deal with both. Because a lot of us, we need to deal with something old while also dealing with something new based off of the challenges that are starting to come through. The new filings, the new documentation, we still have new in here. And even the new documentation can create shock or a shock wave that something isn't going to continue, something isn't going to be allowed. One person will be very shocked, or other people will be very excited based off of the news that's coming through with Uranus's square to Mercury. Okay, moving this along. We're in this vibration all day. This was building up throughout the day on Tuesday. I didn't put too much emphasis on it. It's going exact on Wednesday, and I feel like more people will feel it over the course of Wednesday. As we get into the early morning hours between 5:30 and 8 a.m., I got this now at 6:30. Mars, 17 degrees, 31 minutes, is going to hit this square to the moon simultaneously between 6:30 and 9 a.m. So I'm going to bump this to 7:30. The moon is starting to hit its opposition to Jupiter. And this is actually why I wanted to wait and cover this more at the closing when it comes to Jupiter hitting the square to Mars. I feel like an outside source in some way either brings the challenge, brings the direction, brings the vibration, gives the approval, gives something in the energy as to what we're going to do. Mars is going to hit the square to the moon, and that can be tense, but it can be about direction. Mars in the higher authority, it's more about direction. This is what you need to do. This is what needs to happen. This is where we need to go. Direction there. Now, it is still Mars, and Mars isn't always the nicest. So sometimes he can be a bit of an asshole in regards to, this is what I need you to do. And if that happens, we can ruffle some feathers really fast. And it's like some deep-seated things are starting to bubbling up to the surface. When the moon hits that opposition to Jupiter, this is talking to the doctor, the guru, the teacher. This is taking something to an authority figure. This is being an authority figure talking to another authority figure about somebody else's actions that may require judgment. And there's something that feels like there's an underlying thing going on with Mars, because Mars hasn't been doing a whole lot while in Libra. It's been a lot more like things going underneath the surface. And there can be something that comes to light that's been weeks in the making right around this energy. Now, are we all dealing with some kind of challenge first thing in the morning on Wednesday? No, the human effect is it can take place at any time throughout the day on Wednesday, but there is tension here. There can be judgment here. There can be frustration here. There can be fighting here, but then there can also be something that triggers an approval, that triggers a go ahead. There is movement. There is activity. There's a lot of things going on. And even though we're doing the moon and Jupiter in the feminine energies, Mars is a very masculine planet. Libra is a masculine air sign. We don't always associate Libra and think of it as masculine, but it is masculine. But it's kind of like the metro version of masculine. So we want to be fair. We want to be righteous. We want to be clean about something. And there is something about whether it is clean or not, whether it is fair or not, that is starting to get triggered or activated. And this again is showing us something in regards to the full square of what we're going to be dealing with on Thursday when Jupiter hits that square to Mars. And there is a buildup all week. This is a part of the buildup. Part of that buildup can have tension. Part of that buildup can have frustrations. Be aware of that too. We're going to keep this going. It's going to be a busy morning when it comes to Wednesday morning. The moon is still going to be in Capricorn all day long. We're going to get all the way into the evening time between 10 p.m. and midnight. So I'm getting this down to 10:30. The moon in Capricorn is going to hit the square to Chiron. Now remember, Jupiter and Mars, we are still building a square right here. And the reason I'm bringing that part up is because Chiron is in Mars' sign. Jupiter is in the moon's sign. Some of the action that must be taken might be more solution oriented. And we can have things that in regards to, we need to find a solution. We need to find a fix. We need to get something approved. We need to get something going. And in the late parts of Wednesday, we can pick back up, but it's like the extra layer of something of talking out the solutions, talking out an idea about an action that needs to happen, about a direction that needs to start to take shape. It is not necessarily taking shape right here. It feels like it's more a part of Thursday, but it can. Human effect is this square between Jupiter and Mars, it's active. They're less than 30 minutes apart based off of like the astrological minutes that it's here. So we're in the square. And part of us, whenever it comes to this vibration, can be talking about a solution of what we desire, of what we need, of what's going to happen in regards to direction and path. And a lot of this is still feeling like it's coming from some old stuff coming back around of like, we didn't plan this out very well before. We weren't expecting all of this before. it's coming to light, it's coming to the surface, it's coming to the forefront in different ways. And it's like we need to talk through the solutions of old and new simultaneously. Okay, we'll keep it going. Moving this forward in the overnight hours, because after that square with Chiron, the moon is going to go void until about 4 a.m. Sorry, it wasn't quite void yet. I don't know why I said that. The moon is going to hit a sextile to Saturn. Now, this is going to go the most exact between 4 and 6:30 a.m. So you can kind of see it right here at 4:30. We're getting close to it. I moved to 5:30. It's a little bit closer. Here's the moon. Here's Saturn. The moon is in Saturn's sign. Sextiles are not harsh, but there can still be hard conversation. There can be different things that need to be communicated about. There can be different things that need to be focused on. And we can become aware of what a focus needs to be, or an action that needs to occur. Because remember, simultaneously, we still have this Jupiter-Mars square that has not perfected yet. So a lot of people can be getting final approval, final go-ahead of an action, of a desire, permission to do something, acceptance of something. And as soon as it gets accepted, let's say we get the acceptance of something first thing in the morning, at 5:32 a.m., I got it now at 5:30, I'm going to bump to 6:30, the moon is going to go into Aquarius. And as soon as the moon goes into Aquarius, it's going to start doing its transits. And it's going to be a very busy morning when it comes to September the 4th. We have a lot of things going on. We have a lot of actions. We have a lot of activity. We have a lot of judgment. We have a lot of reaction. We have a lot of attention. We have a lot of tension itself. There's a lot going on. Once the moon goes into Aquarius, there is news, there is communication, there are announcements, there is a lot of information coming out. Information overload for some people. There's going to be announcements for some people, but there's a lot of noise once we get into Thursday morning. Very, very quickly, there is noise that kind of sets the stage for what we're going to be dealing with over the next few days while the moon is in Aquarius. It is going to get very, very loud. And there's going to be a lot of tension and judgment and frustration in regards to these announcements. Now, that can be in the big collective, big picture sense, just as much as it can be in the individual mundane sense of what Aquarius represents for you. And we're in a buildup in this energy. And there is going to be an action and a reaction in this energy. And there's going to be a lot of movement going on, even though whenever you initially think with Aquarius, you wouldn't think a lot of movement. But because we have so much going on throughout the day on Thursday, there will be a lot of movement. There will be a lot of activity that is going to later, over the course of the weekend, trigger emotions. And we have to go through some things, hear some things, logically talk through some things before we go into that emotional, whether positive or negative, element that's going to pop up over the course of the weekend. So we're going to keep this going. The moon is now in Aquarius. And as soon as the moon goes into Aquarius, it's still in that sextile from Saturn. It's going to enter a sextile to Neptune as well as trining Uranus. We're going to be feeling this vibration from basically what I start to explain next, from 4 a.m. all the way until about 11 a.m., just to be clear. So there's a lot of activity going on here. The sextile between Neptune and Uranus is felt more between the 7 and 9:30 a.m. standpoint. There could be something about the unknown, something that we didn't necessarily see coming, with something with confusion with Neptune. But whenever we hit that trine to Uranus, and Uranus is now about 36 hours away from turning retrograde, there could be something that is unnerving, something that has like a shock or a shock wave in the vibration of letting us know that we aren't going to continue something, or letting us know that something has come to a stopping point, like this is the end of our growth pattern. And I kind of said that before, whenever Uranus was in that square to Mercury. These two are now kind of separated enough. We've had a lot of things that bring up that communication. And simultaneously, the moon is hitting the conjunction to Pluto. This is going to be felt the most exact between 7:30 and 10 a.m. And this can be tension. This can be triggers. This can be insecurity. And given the fact that we still have this Jupiter-Mars square that is building, There's a lot of this tension that is going to bring a lot of insecurities to the forefront. There's a lot of this direction that is either going to make us overcome a fear, even though it's not going to immediately feel like overcoming a fear, or it's going to make us reflect and go back towards an old fear that we didn't realize was needing to be dealt with. Because again, we have that old bleeding into the new all throughout this week. And a lot more of the old is coming to the forefront in the second half of the week now that we're in it compared to the first half of the week. So be aware, we've got that old still coming through. All right. Between the 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. marker, we have a lot of transits going on. So a lot of people are going to be very, very busy throughout the day on Thursday, having to deal with a lot of things. Some things are going to be kind of confusing. Some things are going to be like going into an unknown situation. Some things are going to hit the little bits of the brakes. Even if we don't realize we're hitting the brakes right then, it will find some ways of coming out. All throughout the day, we are building up to the exact square between Jupiter and Mars. This is actually going to go exact between 9:23 and 10:35 p.m. So I got this now at 9:30, and you can see it. Here's Jupiter, 18 degrees, 35 minutes. Here's Mars, 18 degrees, 35 minutes. Now, Jupiter is in an area of the sky where Mars did damage. In some ways, this goes back to last fall, September, October timeframe. In some ways, this can go back to the springtime, specifically February, March timeframe, because Mars spent about 5 weeks between 17 and 18 degrees of Cancer. And that would have been the last 3 weeks of February. So literally 3/4 of February, and the first 2.5, 3 weeks of March. And if you guys remember March was March. Like we had Venus retrograde, we had Mercury retrograde, we had eclipse season, we had a lot of shit going on in March. And we didn't even realize back then what all we were committing to, what all we were connecting with. We had delays, we had new things, we had old things. And we have this vibration that again speaks to blending the timelines. And in some ways, Jupiter right here is expanding what we did before, because if we did something more in an alignment energy, good on you. And Jupiter in this higher authority, in this square to Mars, is like, I'm going to expand this, and this is the action I want you to take. Hitting the square to Mars. Expansion, what you did before, and for me to expand, you have to do this. And Jupiter hitting that square to Mars. And again, we have some things that speaks to a new direction and new path. But for other people, if karmically we went through rough things back in the early parts of what Mars was doing throughout the end of the retrograde, right at the start of the Venus retrograde, so again, February, March timeframe, if Mars was doing something negative in that area, Jupiter is now trying to heal it, but that healing is not necessarily coming through easily. And again, Jupiter rules the eclipse we're about to go into. So really, we got to be reflective of what we were doing before, because it's playing into this. And where we might need to heal something, the healing might require action that not everybody likes, the judgment that not everybody likes. I knew you were a piece of shit. I knew you were cheating on me. I knew this happened. I want a divorce, that type of thing. And that's if we're in the negative. This energy feeds us all throughout the rest of the week. We've been building to it. It feeds us into the rest of the week. And remember, Jupiter rules that Pisces eclipse. So that's speaking layers to what we're building up to in this vibration. Oh, it's going to be an interesting evening. If you have a hard time sleeping, I will not be surprised. We're going to get into the 5th. And in the overnight hours between 3:30 and 6 a.m., got this now at 4:30, the moon is going to hit an opposition to Venus. Now, what's interesting about Venus is going over an area of the sky where Mercury had just been retrograde. And I didn't really put a whole lot of emphasis onto this, but she is still bringing results. She's still bringing things to the surface. She's still telling us some things. And when the moon hits this opposition to Venus, there can be the awareness of something positive, considering Venus rules Libra, where Mars is at. The moon rules Cancer, where Jupiter is at. This can be an extra layer of like the challenge, the acceptance, the judgment, the result, the consequences of what the summer has brought forth, of what the previous vibrations have brought forth. It can be a summation of two different timelines coming together simultaneously. You had to do all the work in the springtime to get to where you were in the fall, and where you've been now in this, this early part of the fall is now like feeding off of before, but there's appreciation and there's hopefulness with Venus hitting the opposition to the moon. And it's like long-standing vibration in that result. We're going to keep this going. In the afternoon time between 3 and 5 p.m., Mars is going to hit a trine to the moon. Excuse me. I got Mars here 19 degrees, 4 minutes. It's hitting that trine to the moon at 1853. So you can kind of see that here. This vibration, it can have tension to it. It can have frustrations to it. The reason I'm saying it can have tension and frustration is because Mars is still in that square from Jupiter. For some people, it's explaining the action we're about to take, or it's giving direction or news about the action with Mars hitting the trine to the moon. But it's like we're getting one side of the dynamic. And that really can make a difference of like whenever it comes to the Mars side, if it's going to be tension or if it's going to be like drive or motivation or excitement. Because we don't know what Jupiter has done. We don't know what Jupiter told Mars. And some of us are going to find ourselves in situations where we're hearing one side of a disruption and not either knowing the other side because of the quincunx right here between the moon and Jupiter, not seeing eye to eye. There's an in conjunction. There's something in the way. I don't know her. I don't know them. They don't know me. Or we do know that side in some way, but we don't have direct connection to them. We don't necessarily see eye to eye with them on a regular basis. Either we completely do not know them at all, or in this situation, we're only getting one half of the story. And that's the side that we want to side with. And now that can make a difference once we get into, the weekend and we get into the actual eclipse. Some parts of that might change. But in this moment, we're getting like one side of a story, and how positive or negative it can really depend on what we're dealing with Mars and Libra. And again, this feels like the result of whatever the direction is that Jupiter is pushing onto Mars. So for some people, that is going to be positive. For other people, it is going to be negative. But expect awareness of a drive, a frustration, or something like that. But also be aware of the pumping of the brakes. And some of the disruption that you can hear with Mars can have us internally thinking, again, oh, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to be around somebody. I don't want to deal with something. Why am I saying that? Because this is the last day of Uranus being direct. Uranus is about to turn retrograde. He actually turns retrograde for me at 11:52 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I'm going to bump this forward to that 11:30 marker. At this moment, Uranus is still retrograde. For a lot of people, Uranus's retrograde is actually going to start on the 6th. For more of us, it's going to be on the 5th. So be aware of this. For some people, Uranus's retrograde will be on the 6th. So it's going to be on Saturday. For other people, it is going to be on the 5th. But the moon is in Aquarius. The moon is in Uranus's sign while Uranus is turning retrograde. And many of us are going to go into the weekend feeling like something has had a sudden pump of brakes, a sudden awareness of shift, of change. As much as we are still trying to get something new coming through, we're also finding out somebody won't continue something can't move forward, something is going to stop, somebody is suddenly going to want to be disconnected. I don't want to work there anymore. They're trying to make me do something. And it's so funny. There's so many times that when Uranus turns retrograde, I see people just like burning bras. But I think it's going to be different because for the first time, Uranus is turning retrograde in Mercury sign. It's in Gemini. So some people might have a sudden break in technology. Somebody might have a sudden shift in communication. Some people are going to have a sudden shift in information that we don't immediately know how to handle. Because now I'm thinking Uranus turning retrograde in Gemini, and the sudden shift of information. I feel like for a lot of people, the human effect is it's coming through somewhere between the 5th, the 6th, and even the 7th, based off of like how things are going to continue. Uranus is now retrograde. Now, as we get deeper into the actual 6th, between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., which isn't that deep, but I know, the moon in Aquarius is going to hit a sextile to Chiron. This isn't heavy energy, and I feel like most people, if in the overnight hours, this is going to be more of a download energy than anything else. If you're having a hard time sleeping, it's because we're trying to think of a solution towards something. We're trying to get over something. For other people, there is going to be like a download that kind of comes through the forefront in the daytime whenever we need to come up with a solution, but it's like the solution came to us without actual conversation. Not everybody's having a conversation in the overnight hours on what a solution might be. But the moon hitting the sextile to Chiron, it's about the wounds, it's about solutions. This is very neutral energy, and we're just trying to like work something in, but we're not necessarily completely aware of what we're working in. We're just becoming aware of a wound. This is one thing that speaks to a wound. Another is going to come through once we get into the morning at 10:55 a.m. Central Standard Time. So I got this now at boom, here's 11:30. The moon is now in Pisces. As soon as the moon goes into Pisces, we are now in eclipse energy. Now, the eclipse is not viewable for us here in North America, but if you're over in India, New Zealand, Australia, that area, you will be able to see this lunar eclipse. Just be aware of that. So we're going into the full moon. We're going into this vibration. And as soon as the moon goes into Pisces, whether it is emotions in the healing sense, whether it is emotions in the medicinal sense, we have things that are going to come to the forefront. And for some people, we need an outer exterior shock that brings that up. And considering as soon as the moon goes into Pisces, it hits a square to that newly retrograde Uranus. Some of us are going into the weekend immediately finding out that they've lost support with something, or we're going to find out that somebody else is removing support from another person and they're not even aware yet. But there's a trajectory change, there's an information change, there is a mental overload that immediately takes shape as soon as the moon goes into Pisces. And again, for the next 2.5 days, so all throughout the rest of the 6th, all day on the 7th, going into the 8th, we are in eclipse vibration. Eclipse season is active. Pre-show is over. The last 2 weeks have been a pre-show. Now we're going into the big show. Now we're going into the Super Bowl. Now we're going into eclipse season. Be aware of that World Cup, whatever the heck it is you watch or you're aware of. It's that level of vibration as soon as the moon goes into Pisces. Now, the moon is going to hit the square to Uranus somewhere between 12:30 and 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I got this now at 1:30 p.m. Here is the moon, 1 degrees, 30 minutes. Here is Uranus, 1 degrees, 27, but retrograde. Some of us are going to hear, we're going to learn, we're going to discover that there has been a sudden accident. There has been a sudden shift in opinion. There has been somebody that has hit a wall. There has been something that has come to the forefront. And as soon as you hear that change, like it can be like that person is dealing with emotions because of what has suddenly come through. But for you, you might be dealing with some kind of emotion because somebody else is so suddenly shifted, unexpectedly shifted, unexpected vibration with Uranus turning retrograde. And again, this will be our first Uranus retrograde turn in Gemini. For a lot of us, we're going to see something that we haven't seen in the same way as before. Because in previous patterns, when Uranus turned retrograde, especially whenever it was in Taurus, like every time I always had at least 3 to 5 girls like, I'm gonna burn my bras, I'm blocking that guy, I'm never gonna talk to him again, I am free, I am done. But that was Uranus and Taurus is ruled by Venus. So of course I'm expecting stuff with the females. Of course we're gonna burn some bras. There's something very different about Uranus and Gemini. And whatever the mutable signs rule for you, they're now ultra activated. Yay! Yay! Moving along. After the moon square to Uranus, there ain't a whole lot going on transit wise, but we are still in the moon in Pisces. We are still dealing with emotions, new and old emotions simultaneously. Some of us need to be aware of something that we need to heal. Some of us need to be aware of things that we need to just get rid of or overcome. Now we're going to get into Sunday. I got it on the 7th between 1:30 and 3:30 a.m. So I got it now at 2:30. The moon in Pisces is going to hit this opposition to Mercury. Some of us are going to be talking about the opinion change. Some of us are going to be talking about the information change. Some of us are talking about the technology change because, again, Uranus just turned retrograde in Mercury's sign. We had a Uranus-Mercury square earlier in the week that let us know of some sudden news and sudden vibration, and then Uranus turned retrograde. So we've had a lot of sudden things this week too, in the challenges, in the ideas. Some of us are going to be telling someone how we feel, but it's like we only meet somebody that wants to logic it out. And the thing is that logic is not helping our emotions and it's not helping our feelings. Some people can talk about their emotions. Some people just need to be a sounding board that there's emotions coming to the surface. Some people need to feel seen or understood. Other people are going to be trying to talk over somebody else about their feelings. And we need to watch that shit because that's not a good thing to be doing during a full moon eclipse in Pisces. Allow people to feel their emotions. They're going to frickin' feel them. Moving along. Between 12 and 2 p.m., that is whenever the full moon eclipse is going to be felt the most. It actually goes exact at 1:09 p.m. Central Standard Time. This, again, will not be viewable for us here in the States. If you are in that southern hemisphere, again, somewhere between Australia, New Zealand, India, like all of that area, this will be a viewable eclipse for over there. That doesn't mean that we do not feel it because it's going to be felt. So we have this full moon eclipse in Pisces. I will again put more emphasis on this on the month ahead video. This will have its own video at the end of next week tied to the eclipse based off everybody's sign. So I'm not going to harp on it too much. After the full moon eclipse is done, somewhere between that 6 and 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, the moon is going to hit a trine to Jupiter. So here's the moon, 19 degrees, 8 minutes. Here is Jupiter, 19.5. Now, the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. I'll cover this a little bit more whenever I do the actual full moon video. There is an understanding. There is emotional understanding. There is need for emotional nurturing. There is something about the health. There's stuff about the doctor, the guru, the teacher. There's this element that speaks to I need support. In other ways, we will be offering support. We will be offering guidance whenever it comes to the moon hitting the trine to Jupiter. I need to understand. I need to learn. I need to know what I don't know whenever it comes to that trine between the moon and Jupiter. What's interesting is while the moon is going through this trine, it is now the one in the quincunx to Mars. And for some people, this does take me back to just a few days ago whenever Mars was hitting that trine to the moon. And I feel like for some people, we can hear one thing right there in that Thursday time frame whenever Mars was hitting that trine to the moon. We can hear one thing. Oh, that was on Friday. Okay. There can be something about Thursday and Friday that we heard one version of something. And then some of us are going to be in a situation to where we can hear the other side and we need to understand. And we're more likely to be emotionally connected to that other side, that need to understand, that need to nurture. So I do expect for some people there will be some kind of big challenge that speaks through Thursday, Friday, that also feeds into Saturday, Sunday, more so this Sunday timeframe. But there's a big element here that speaks to direction, nurturing, guidance, healing, and understanding. And considering that Jupiter is in Cancer, there's a lot that speaks to ways to heal. And again, given Jupiter's placement in the sky, and he's covering areas where we've had previous connections and previous transits, especially the Mars stuff, there can be stuff from the past that starts to bubble up in the surface through that eclipse. And sometimes the past coming back up is what feeds into the direction. It feeds into the action. It feeds into our desires. It feeds into our hopes and dreams, the elements of abundance, the elements of our desires. And that takes me back to right before the eclipse happened, we had the square between Jupiter and Mars. Now, depending on the form of astrology that you pay attention to, in most tropical astrologies, whenever we look at Mars as that masculine energy, it can be a marker for masculine relationships or husbands. In Vedic astrology, they actually look at Jupiter for the longevity for husbands. And there can be things in regards to the desires of the masculine that really overwhelm and overshape why the emotions are coming out. Somebody's saying something too harshly and judging, bringing forth the emotions, some actions as to what has happened over the course of this year, forcing the old wounds to come to the surface, forcing the action or the reaction. Because the thing is, we can only hold our trauma for so long. And every time you hold some kind of trauma in, it starts to impact the body. It impacts our body. And there's certain things that need to come to the surface now. And as they come to the surface, it is either becoming the reason why we need to continue, why we need to do the new, or it is becoming a part of the new. All of those old wounds have brought us to this point in our relationship. And it's either time to shit or get off the pot. All of the lessons and everything that we did working for those businesses has now set us up for this level of success, emotional validation, and success with where we're going in relationship and where we're going in our partnerships and where we're going in our business. Some of the past needs to come back around to validate that we have healed, that we have worked through something. In other ways, the things that need to come up from the past are because we've been ignoring them. We put them on the back burner. We didn't feel like they needed attention at that time. And little by little, things from the past are coming to the forefront. They're coming to the surface. They're coming into reality. And there's something about the old that starts to clog the new, pumping of the brakes. It doesn't mean that we're not meant to do the new. It means that only so much growth potential, and I've been saying that all summer, we only get to do so much, but the bigger ideas that start to come to light, the bigger ideas of what we want to come into focus, they're not going to be able to happen. They're going to be more a 2026 thing. I think a lot more people are going to go into this first week of September becoming aware of where they're reaching their limits, of what's not going to continue. Now, for some of you, that's going to be about the productivity, the production, the business stuff, the hustle that you have been in, and you're starting to hit a limit. For other people, you're going to be trying to do a bigger thing, and it's like one roadblock after another. The universe is saying, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. Here's a rule, here's a policy, here's a thing, here's a thing. Nope, 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 nope. Can't do it, can't do it, can't do. Nope. Well, why? Because I said no. The universe finds ways to stop us. The universe finds ways to test us. The universe always finds a way. Ancestors got jokes. I say that a lot. I don't say it on the podcast very often, but I say it to people like ancestors got jokes. When it comes to this week's vibration, there is direction of new while simultaneously challenges that bleed in. We got the first glimpses of them last week. Going into this first week in September, we are going to be far more aware of the old stuff, old emotions, old feelings, old dynamics, the things that happened in the past that we try to let go of, but then that pattern of behavior came back around of like, oh, you still want to play games. I gave you grace. I gave you forgiveness, not permission, forgiveness. And now you want to try that shit again. Now you want to play games again. Now you want to push my buttons again. Not going to fly. So if you're going to continue, it's not going to be with me. We're going to see that dynamic in our relationships. We're going to see that dynamic in our partnerships. We're going to see the dynamic of what can continue and what won't continue. Because a lot of people are going to start to hit walls. How big or how small those walls are going to be is going to be different for everybody. But there is a blending and a blurring of the vibration that's really taking shape. And the thing is, like when old stuff comes up, it usually comes with emotions. Or emotions find ways of bringing it back up, of bringing the things back to the surface, insecurities coming back up, old wounds coming back up. And whenever we get to that full moon in Pisces, it is either going to show us one more element of just how deep an old wound is, because I always compare Pisces to the frickin' ocean. You never quite know where the bottom is. You don't necessarily remember what's all down there, because whatever's down there is thriving in darkness. For some people, there will be a darkness that comes to light this week. For other people, there's going to be tests to the healing and whether you have done the lessons or not. And how you feel at the end of it will let you know whether you have done the lessons or not. Some of you are going to find yourselves in periods of being support for other people in their healing process. But you see the pattern of something that you did in the past, and it's like, oh my God, I was really dumb. I was really dumb with that guy because she's doing the same shit that I used to do. Baby, please learn from my lessons. Please don't repeat these mistakes. You know they're going to repeat the mistakes in some way. But the past always finds a way to come back. And I feel like there's a big part of the past that's coming through even while we're trying to do the new. And once we get through this week, we're going to recognize what we get to continue with and what we don't real fast. Jupiter square to Mars can be seen in the collective sense and the sense of like what's impacting the masses. And whenever I do the month ahead video, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more because there has been a history between Jupiter and Mars over the course of the last year. They've had a conjunction last summer that actually kicked off all of the gauntlet energy that took us through the roller coaster into where we're at now. There was a multitude of hidden transits that happened while we were wrapping up that Mars retrograde. That really was a big part of that energy of what we were doing in February and March. And I want to cover that a little bit more in that month ahead. There's a lot of things I want to say right now that I really want to save for the month ahead because I don't want to repeat myself too much. It gets annoying even for me after a while. So, all right. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Hit me up with questions. Hit me up with concerns. I'll talk to everybody very, very soon. Subscribe.